Joining me now is Tom Littleton. I want to talk about Peter Thiel. Isn't he the guy over there at Palantir? Peter Thiel, who's obsessed with the idea of the Antichrist and building the system that will stop us from having either Armageddon or Antichrist. Remember, Armageddon or Antichrist, or there's a third option, this system he's building. And he's the guy over at Palantir, and he's been he held his 4 classes on the Antichrist. Well, he seems to be, I think, from what I'm hearing, big time into pumping money into what are supposedly, quote, Christian, end quote, nationalist agendas. I want to learn more. And Tom Littleton joins us as our religious Trojan horse reporter. Faith-driven investors, halftime, solving the world's greatest problems, as Peter Thiel resourced alongside the Bible. Tom, welcome back to the broadcast. Thank you for being with us. And I know you've been spending many, many months researching Peter Thiel and his funding of conservative groups, Christian groups, and really pushing the Christian nationalist movement. And for the audience, would you please explain the difference between many of our audience who we believe in borders, our own language, our own history, our culture, our own laws, not universal globalist laws, our own currency, not a global currency. You know, we believe in those things that are unique to us as a nation. Describe the difference between what most of us believe that are watching this broadcast now and the nationalism that's being pushed by Peter Thiel. How's it different?
Well, this goes back to NatCon, an organization that was pulling together some evangelical voices that Thiel has been a part of for a while, and they hold national conferences. And actually, he's a libertarian, and like some other quote-unquote conservatives, and he's Catholic, as I understand, who's now self-identifying as Christian. There's some clear distinctions between the impression that they're giving in the marketing, but and the reality. But the Christian nationalist message, you and I began to warn against it, compared to the idea of being pro-America, pro-Constitution, patriotic. Those ideas, which are sort of central to MAGA and it's the momentum that MAGA has and the galvanizing that Trump has done of evangelicals. But alongside of that, healthy, patriotic, America first, protect our borders, let's push these progressive agendas out of the way and reverse some of this craziness we've seen through recent administrations. That idea is for a strong America, but not for what is being dubbed as Christian nationalism, which is generally, in a Christian sense, is embraced by people who are amillennial and who have a skewed eschatology and believe that they're going to usher in the kingdom of God by establishing a Christianized America. And they even see revival in that lens, that if we're going to bring America back, we have to revive it as a Christian nation, which they assert was the way it began. But we're seeing Thiel come into play on every front. And he's very tied through NatCon to significant leaders who are promoting Christian nationalism, like Doug Wilson, we reported about a lot, and also Albert Mohler. And then a lot of their younger disciples, people like William Wolfe and some of these younger, more zealous and outspoken Christian nationalists. Most of these guys are seminary guys who have opened these little boutique organizations like the Center for Baptist Leadership. We don't know where the funding is coming from those, but they've had these connections through NatCon to Thiel and to that network. So those are the kind of things I'm keeping a very close eye on, and have even engaged a few of the people on the fringes of that movement. They're even beginning to colonize and build Christian communities and buy up old towns and start building Christian nationalist communities like the Amish or something. It's really getting strange. And we see those people had courted Charlie Kirk and his organization Turning Point Faith, which was started around 2022. Those two organizations were merging from a lot of indications. And we know that Kirk had some ties to Peter Thiel himself. And so we look at this presence that is sort of ubiquitous. It's everywhere you turn. So we're still looking for the money trail, but this significant movement with the faith-driven investors, you and I have reported on that before, and now we see not only does he have one of the Palantir guys involved, he is also in the wings with his book being resourced. And you talked about his Antichrist lectures. He actually did 4 of those lectures on the Acts 17 collective that was started by a guy, Trey Stevens, and his wife, Michelle, who are actually part of this faith-driven investors movement now. What has changed since we last reported on this faith-driven investors is that they announced a merger with Bob Buford, who brought the Drucker legacy into the Christian church through an organization called Leadership Network. They brought him in with his halftime since Buford had died. They announced a merger of faith-driven investors and the Halftime Institute. Now, if you recall, years ago, we reported on this. I'm going to hold it up where people can see it. This book, The World We Want, is a globalist organization's book, basically telling you this is what we're going to do. This is the world that we want. These are people who work closely with the UN, and their goal here is to manipulate philanthropy. It says new dimensions in philanthropy and social change. You know what social change means?
Social justice.
Social justice, exactly. But Buford said in this book that he could deliver legions of wealthy Christians primed to become big-time philanthropists. Now, that was said to a non-Christian, to a globalist, to a person working with the UN, with their organization and the world we want. And he made that boast that he could deliver these legions of wealthy Christians. And that organization, Halftime, was the way he had primed Christians for this philanthropy. That organization now, as of 2024, has merged into Faith-Driven Investors, and Faith-Driven Investors has Thiel's resources alongside the Bible and one of Thiel's main guys completely embedded and contributing to this movement. So we're looking at a significant change. If you recall, we also pointed out in this movement that all of these donor advised funds and faith-based giving and investing, these guys have gone after the philanthropy, but now with faith-driven investors, they're actually going for the other 90%. They boasted that. And one of their members, Chuck Bentley, formed what was called the Christian Economic Forum. If you recall, when I discovered that, you and I both were just blown away that they had created what he called a Davos for Christian leaders. And he was inspired by World Economic Forum and built this thing on the template of that. But now the single biggest change that we see, we could see the social justice in the shadows. And the New York Times had covered this faith-driven investors movement. But we could see that they were pushing social justice through the New York Times article. It was sort of in the shadows, but now they are full on promoting a message and an organization as part of faith-driven investors called Solving the World's Biggest Problems. And these are in keeping with the peace plan that Rick Warren did, also a Drucker disciple. And they are pushing this idea that they're going to work with the United Nations. They said they're indebted to the United Nations and to the Sustainable Development Goals to help them outline and identify and strategize this solving the world's greatest problems. 32 of them they've identified with your money, with Christians' money. And so this whole investment movement, and they also have an entrepreneurial wing and then a student wing. All this is being pushed into the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, and they're completely open about it.
So in other words, we're taking off where they're picking up where Rick Warren kind of left off with his global peace plan. We're transforming the churches big time in 2008. It just really kicked into high gear. Churches becoming more about nickels and noses, growing, offering the culture a church that they can feel comfortable at. And then as you bring in more people and have more resources, you use those resources for social justice, social change. You maybe even start a nonprofit off to the side of your church that can then take government money as partners with the government, as long as you don't pass out tracts or Bibles. The church thinks you're doing ministry, but what the church leaders have been taught is if you start a separate sister organization from the church, a 501c3 that you do dental work or healthcare of some kind, then you can get government money as public partners with the government and really make even more money than you are from people that are tithing to your church or giving money to your church. So you're really setting up the basically your funnel of, hey, let's make money on contributions and then let's make money on partnerships with the government, but blend it all as being doing the work of the Lord. But what you're really doing is the work of the devil, building a social justice kingdom on earth that you call Christianity, right?
Right. And to imagine that all these venture capitalists like Thiel and others, this Palantir guy that's working with them, Trey Stevens, these guys are actually, they're actually forming a narrative that helps people who are willing to let go of an eternal gospel and a pro-Israel, I might add, view of the church and exchange that through what they are promoting here is not only the church giving, but actually investing your goods, your assets into their scheme to address those needs. I mean, if you look at some of their 2035 goals on some of these links, they outline about 10 things that they're seeing as achieved. And one of them on number 8, I have a picture of it in the article. It actually says that they are transferring wealth. By 2035, they're talking about $2 billion a year of wealth being transferred. And if you read that, it says the great transfer of wealth and business ownership hit right as the momentum was building. This is projecting the future, spoken in the future sense in 2035, accelerating the trust of missional movement owned brand caused many families to trust the track record of a team today more than the uncertainty of later generations in their will and estate. So what they're saying, you're going to leave your money to these guys instead of your heirs because you've learned that you can trust them more. I'm not buying that, but especially with these guys signed in and signed on to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They are going to be harvesting a great deal of Christian wealth, which is God's resources that should be in the true work of the kingdom, in the true work of the church, and spreading the gospel, not spreading the values of the United Nations.
And so, of course, what we're trying to do here again is warn people to be very leery of where you give your money and to understand that these folks, many of them are infiltrating what was once conservative evangelical Christianity, and they're trying to redirect it toward really more emphasis on the material, not the spiritual, more emphasis on building social justice programs versus the preaching of the gospel, correct?
Right. All this is equity driven. Everything the United Nations is doing is trying to bring about a level playing field by bringing the West and the free market economies down and redistributing that wealth, transferring that wealth. And you and I have talked again and again about how the guys who run these Christian financial organizations are more driven by accessing the baby boomer trillions in wealth that they know is about to transfer. And so they're basically telling you in this 10-year out projections, hey, people came to trust us more than they trusted their heirs and future generations. So they're not just trying to get your giving, they're trying to get your estate.
So in other words, don't leave it to your children or grandchildren, give it to them.
Leave it to us. And see, here's the problem with that. There's a group called the National Christian Foundation that they also acknowledge that they are indebted to. That was started by Larry Burkett. It's located in Georgia. That organization has a BlackRock former manager who's also on the board of this Solving the World's Greatest Problems, working with these guys, with faith-driven investors. Those guys have incorporated a narrative here, much like the peace plan. And, you and I discovered when the peace plan was launched, that was 2005, they had Bill Gates and the United Nations in tow in this event where that was launched by Rick Warren in New York. And it was a global health initiative. And how can a preacher hook up with a guy who's working with the United Nations and funding abortion and its global agenda through the United Nations to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars? And so we're being very gullible if we think that we can synchronize the United Nations goals and the outcomes that they seek, because the Agenda 2030, as you've covered, you've had so many guests cover it, we come back to it very often. They do want to integrate the church, and they want to integrate Christian wealth into that agenda. They're worried about guys like you and me. I mean, the guy who works with National Christian Foundation that I mentioned here, he had a young pastor from New York where he lives call me and try to diffuse my suspicion of his involvement in it. That's the guy, Bob Dahl. And I'll just say that's been a couple of years ago. And this guy's on a lot of TV outlets and discussing finance and stuff. But there was a young guy who went to bat, young pastor that knew him, was in a couple of organizations and societies with him. And he wanted me to rethink my position on the contribution of Bob, which Bob is on the Lausanne board, and he's also the Lausanne movement. He's also on the board of the National Christian Foundation, and he's on this board with this faith-driven investors with the Solving the World's Problems. So these guys are very professional money managers, and so are the people coming out of Palantir. We're looking at, that Palantir has made most of its people at the ground level and the founders, it's made them all billionaires, some of them multi-billionaires in the recent months. I think Peter Thiel has added some $17 billion to his wealth. So they have a lot of money to prime the pump and make this thing appear to be succeeding, and people want to put their money where it's working. And if there's this groundswell of money going into it, then it must be the right thing. And so people are not aware that a lot of this stuff is being primed, but they're going to pull this donor money away and ultimately be looking to Christians to be the ones who they've exploited to support it, in my opinion. And so we have to step back from this stuff and be very sober. And first of all, say, what am I supposed to do from a spiritual perspective with what God has entrusted to me and my family? Well, first and foremost, we should be looking for eternal purpose, things of eternal value to invest our resources and our giving as God leads into, things that will have outcomes for the gospel, for transformation of human hearts, not seeking to end human trafficking and open borders and address poverty. The way they want to end the problems of most of the world's population is decrease the population. We know that very clearly. So we can't be a part of that and being fooled into thinking that that's serving the gospel. It is.
Yeah. And we're opposed to open borders, we're opposed to sex trafficking, but don't confuse that with the gospel. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? But we don't replace one with the other. And isn't that Satan's goal, to get us to take what is good and replace it what is the ultimate best, right? And think that we're doing God's work because we're doing all these moral deeds, but we somehow have left out the gospel. And you can save people from horrific situations, but if they die and go off to hell for eternity, what have we really done for them when we didn't share Christ with them? And so we can't replace moralizing good works with the ultimate Great Commission. We can do both. The problem is, with a lot of these guys, they don't know the gospel, the Great Commission. They don't want to promote it. And so many people are being led into believing that is the Great Commission when it's not. I hope you'll go visit his website, 30piecesofsilver.org, 30piecesofsilver.org. As always, Tom, thank you for your updates.
Thank you, man. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Tom Littleton checking in. Check it out tonight, folks. 30piecesofsilver.org. All right, that's our broadcast for tonight, folks. Remember, we're brought to you by you. Roll the music, guys. Let's call it a night. Please consider going now to worldviewfoundation.com, making a contribution of any size. We are looking for more regular monthly contributors so we can have a little stress taken off because we know what's coming in each month because you've set up an automatic contribution. Never think that your $5 or $10 a month doesn't count, that we don't need it, it won't make a difference. That's not true when it's added to the support of so many others. So thank you for going now to worldviewfoundation.com. Till next time at Brandon House, may God save America. Take care.